Next up, we've got the CLI configuration of the Cisco Nexus 1000v. It operates much the same way as any other Cisco iOS device as far as the command line is concerned. So I'm going to type in configure terminal, and these are some very specific commands to the Nexus 1000v. SVS connection, and I'll give it a name, vCenter con, protocol VMware Vim, remote IP address 10.10.10.100, which is the IP address of our vCenter server. VMware DVS data center name. Now this is where it is important to exactly get the name of your data center. And this is why I said earlier that I didn't want to use the space in the data center name. And the name of my data center is data center. There we go. And I type in connect. And if I look over here on the right, I can see that everything went through just fine. Everything completed, there's no errors. Everything's very happy. Okay, the next step is port profile, type Ethernet. What that means is this particular port profile is going to be tied to a physical network adapter if it were a server, but since we're in a VMWorkstation environment, it's going to be tied to a VMnet, which is, if you recall, a dumb switch. Port profile type Ethernet, and we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to name this one uplink _ vem. Vem is, again, the virtual Ethernet module. VMware port group. Now, this command, VMware port group, pushes this configuration to the vSphere, the vCenter server networking setup. Next, switch port mode trunk. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN, and I'm actually going to select all VLANs. If I hit question mark right here, I can see that the entire range of possible VLANs is right there. So if I hit up arrow and just copy and paste that, there we go. I'm allowing all VLANs. This gives me the option in the future of adding VLANs to different devices and putting them all together in their own isolated VLAN. No shutdown. System VLAN 1. Now this system VLAN command is very important so that it can be used for the communication of the VSM with vCenter. And state enabled. Right over here, you can see that uplink VEM, the port group that we created, that was now created on vCenter. So let's go to the host, and if we go to, actually, we're going to go to, instead of hosts and clusters, networking. And if we click on the plus sign, go to our data center, see our Nexus 1000v was deployed. And we have the uplink VEM port group. And because it's got that green wafer as part of the icon, we know that it is tied to a physical network adapter, or in our case, a VMWorkstation virtual adapter. So there's that. Good. Next, we're going to create a port profile, type vEthernet. This port profile is used to connect virtual machines to the switch. And what I'm going to name this one is VMK_MGT. This particular vEthernet port profile is to tie the management IP address of the VSM to a vCenter server. Capability L3 control. Again, very, very important so that this port profile can be used as a layer 3 method of the VSM talking with vCenter and the VEM and so forth. Without that command, it's not going to work. Very important. VMware port group, we've already discussed that. Switch port mode access, switch port access, VLAN 1, no shutdown, again, system VLAN 1, and state enabled. And just like magic, we've got our VM port group created over here in vCenter. We can see that it was created right down here. Now, the final step in getting this Nexus 1000v installed is to install the VEM, or Virtual Ethernet Module. The way that is done is we go into our networking here on the host this time. We're going to go back to the hosts and clusters, configuration, and networking. And we're going to add networking, and we're going to create a VM kernel port group. And we're going to create a new vSphere standard switch to do that. VMNIC1 is perfectly fine. You recall that all of our network adapters were associated with the same VMnet in VMWorkstation. That's why they all see the 10.10.10 network. VMNIC1 is good. Network label, I'm going to call this one VM kernel VEM. And I'll select next. Give it an IP address, again, in the same range as everything else, 10.10.10. I'll make this one 201 with the same subnet mask. And finish. Now that was one preparatory step for installing the VEM. Our next is to enable SSH on the ESXi host. So what I'm going to do is on this configuration, select Security Profile and then Properties. And as you can see, SSH is not running. So I'll select Options and Start. This is like starting a service on Windows. It's now started, and for future use, I'm just going to select Start and Stop with Host. This isn't necessarily recommended by VMware as a standard practice for a production environment. However, this is just a lab, so I don't mind. I'll select OK, OK. Now, the reason why we enabled SSH on that host is so that we could copy the file required to install the VEM. And I'm using a freeware application here called WinSCP. My file protocol is going to be SCP. My host name is actually the IP address, 10.10.10.101. Username. This is again what we set up when we installed the ESXi. I'll select Login. Update. There we go. On the left here, I have my workstation. On the right, I have the file structure of the ESXi host. So I'm going to go to the TMP folder here. And on the left, I'm going to browse to, again, my Cisco Nexus 1000v folder that I downloaded. This time I'm going to go to the VEM folder, and you can see that there are 3 different VIB files here. I happen to know that this one is compatible with my version of vSphere and ESXi. Not all are compatible. You'll want to look that up and be sure. I'm going to drag this over to here, and I can see that that was indeed copied. So that's good. Next, I'm going to bring up Secure CRT once again. And this time I'm going to connect to my ESXi host. I already have a connection prepared here. Accept and save. No, I don't care to specify a new one. And now I've got a very specific command to run here to install the VEM. ESXi software vib install -v, and then the path to the vib file. I'll hit enter, and this actually can take several seconds to complete. Now it's done, and I can see the command output there. To verify, I can type in the command vem status -v. And I can see from the command output that VEM modules are loaded. So that is a good thing. Now back to vCenter. We need to associate the host with the distributed switch, the new Nexus 1000v. So I'm going to go to networking, and I'm going to right-click on this little icon here that represents the Nexus 1000v distributed switch. And I'm going to select Add Host. I only have one host, so that's perfectly fine. And I'll hit Next. Strike the last part. Also, I'm going to select VMNIC1. If you recall, I tied VMNIC1 to that new port group that I created explicitly for this purpose. So over here, select an uplink port group. I select that and uplink VEM. Now, as part of that VM kernel port group that we created a new VMK interface. So I'm going to migrate that as well to VMK MGT. Now, while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to go over here and type in terminal monitor so that we can see what happens when we go through this process. I'll click on Next, Next, Finish, and there it goes. And you can see right there, Module 3 is online. VEM Manager Module online. That is just fantastic. Now, to verify that it is online, I'm going to type in the command show module vem, and there it is. Virtual Ethernet module. Great. That is exactly what we want. This is what we set out to do, to install ESXi, vCenter, and the Cisco Nexus 1000v all on VMWorkstation. And it's working. Back to our host in vCenter, I find that the best way to attach a new virtual machine to the Cisco Nexus 1000v is the same way that we migrated the new VMware port group and the VMK interface. And that is to create it here on either a current virtual switch or a new virtual switch, and then migrate it over to the Cisco Nexus 1000v. So mission accomplished. Congratulations. You can now install any number of virtual machines here. The Cisco CSR 1000v, Cisco ICE, Cisco ACS server, the virtual wireless LAN controller, the ASA-V, all kinds of virtual devices, and run your own labs, do your own testing, all for very little in investment. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was useful for you. If so, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks very much, guys. We'll talk to you next time.